Hi, I'm Aria Dean. I'm an artist and writer and curator. I'm assistant curator at Rhizome at the New Museum, or assistant curator of net art and digital culture at Rhizome at the New Museum. And this panel is called The Web is Political Space. And yeah, we're going to discuss that very topic. I'm just going to give a bit of a preamble and introduce our panelists, and then they're each going to give a brief presentation, and then we're going to focus on conversation, and so we'll have a long conversation between all of us. So I'm Aria. I want to say thank you to Lanka and Jamila for organizing this, and everyone else who was involved, and to Martha Rosler and the earlier panelists. As I said, this panel is titled "The Web as Political Space," and so we've gathered here as a group of panelists who, in one way or another, all of our practices sort of intersect with this question or take it as a driving force. So this ranges from, practicing ways to use the web as a political space or using the web to political ends, but as well, these practices question the web and its political possibilities. And also, I apologize for my voice being sort of scratchy. I'm sort of fighting a cold, I think. Today we're going to consider these questions on a political level, of course, hence the title. But we're also going to consider them historically, materially, and philosophically. In historical terms, when we consider the web as political space, we consider the web's narrative arc. Maybe we all sort of know this story more broadly, but when we think of the early web, we might think of a sort of utopian attitude where everyone can, it's like that old saying, like, on the internet, no one knows you're a dog. Like, you can be whoever you want to be. You can say whatever you want to say, and connect to people all around the world. So I think the internet was sort of spoken of as a space of pure possibility in that sense, offering global connection, utter anonymity, and through that, total freedom as well. And historically, we have to ask what has changed over the years. So since the commercialization of the internet and the rise of social media more recently, our experience of the web has drastically shifted over the years towards one that's based in sort of social media platforms and more commercially driven, corporate controlled websites and navigation. One way that this sort of has manifested across all these things is through things like mass surveillance, but mass surveillance by corporations, by the state, but also by each other. And so I think we're also interested in the sort of social facet of all of this. And then we also have to consider through this, the sort of when we talk about platforms and infrastructure, thinking about alongside the rise of platforms and social media, thinking about the ethical and legal implications as well that these arenas bring forth. So questions of ownership, who owns images, who owns content. If you produce an artwork on social media, do you own the artwork? Does Instagram? That sort of thing. And then also questions of community building and community sustainability. What makes a community? Is it a group of users? Is it a group of people? Is it enclosed? Is it a private Facebook group? Is it a followers list on Twitter? So I think we're all interested in these questions. And then I think returning to the idea of freedom and the early web, sort of asking currently what kind of freedom do we experience online? What kind of freedom do we not experience? What kind of unfreedoms do we experience? And what kind of freedom, or quote unquote freedom, do we pursue? And then philosophically, I think that we're also interested in how the phrase, the web as political space, leads us to ask sort of rhetorically, is infrastructure ever neutral on a sort of baseline level? And what are the ideologies that undergird the web as infrastructure? How do we exploit it to political ends? How do we resist the infrastructure to political ends? So these are just sort of the things that are floating around in the space of this panel, and each panelist will, I'm leaning into it again. Each panelist will sort of take this in their own direction based on their practice. And before we get into their presentations, I'm going to give brief introductions for each of them, but I'm going to let them introduce themselves for the most part. But first we have Ceci, who is a curator, educator, and writer based in Los Angeles, California. And then we have Lupe Rosales, who is an artist based in Los Angeles, California. And we have Angela Washko, who is, and I'm like piecing this together from like knowledge and like listed. Angela Washko is an artist, writer, and facilitator devoted to creating new forms for discussion of feminism in spaces frequently hostile toward it. And Martine Syms, who is an artist based in Los Angeles, California. So without further ado, I will let them take the stage.
So when I think of the web, I don't see it as a discrete, cut and dry concept, but rather I see the web as connected to a larger societal and cultural shift towards what Manuel Castells called the network society. Deleuze talked about the control society. Tiziana Terranova talks about network culture. James Bennegar talks about the shift from the control revolution. So therefore, when we employ the term the web, I see it more as what Foucault would describe as a dispositif or an apparatus, basically a normative system of relations centered around the principle of the distributed network, one that touches on multiple aspects of society, from corporate governance structures, discourse, architecture, the list goes on. So with this little tidbit at the back of our mind, I want to now speak about the development of a new arts organization I launched a few months ago, where I'm deliberately attempting to create an iterant, fluid, diffuse format responsive to 21st century cultural production informed by some of these shifts that I just described. So it's called GAS. It's an arts organization online and in a truck gallery parked around Los Angeles. So the immediate concern for this was to try to start an art space with extreme flexibility and versatility, with little overhead, so the maximum amount of resources that I could hustle could be directed towards the artist and exhibition production, and also for the project to remain sustainable over time. And I'm also interested in experimenting with every open avenue as a possible exhibition space. So this also includes the gallery website, all corners of the physical truck, from the front driver's seat to my own body, to an engagement with the city geography of Los Angeles. And since it's a pop-up, I'm open usually one day a week. There's an emphasis on the experiential, so most visitors are surprised or delighted by the presence of the truck. They don't expect it. And I was also thinking about how that parallels how people experience the way they surf the internet. So there's this, sort of parallel, sort of surprise drift exploration that happens in both of these spaces. So the namesake of the organization is actually a reference to this quote from Nicolas Bourriaud in The Radicant, where he's also kind of talking about art practices in the 21st century. And he says, art is not defined as an essence to be perpetuated in the form of a closed and self-contained disciplinary category, but rather as a gaseous substance capable of filling up the most disparate human activities before once again solidifying in the form that makes it visible as such, the work. So I'm going to show the mission statement. You can silently read it to yourselves. I'm not going to read it to you, but I am going to talk about basically the first part of it. So in the mission statement, I say that GAS is a mobile, autonomous, experimental, and networked platform for contemporary art. And the use of the word platform is key for me. It's intentional. I was thinking of how a platform operates in a technical sense. A platform in the hardware or software framework that supports other programs. So for example, like your Mac operating system. As a platform, I see the formation of an institution at base as a design question, and I wanted to design something native and responsive to the qualities of 21st century culture and art practice, both described by the Bourriaud and some of the other thinkers I rattled off at the beginning of this talk. So GAS is mobile, so by that I mean it's flexible, it occupies multiple sites, both online and offline, it parks around LA, it's autonomous, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot, like what that actually means, but here I'm thinking about putting artists first, having complete freedom in exhibition production, not having traditional sort of institutional constraints, and even rethinking what an institution is, or not even that. And then it's experimental. That means I can take risks, I can program rapidly, I can try things out. It's networked, so the network it's not just the network is not just the gallery website, but extends into the exhibition space. And sometimes I've been sort of thinking about what the exhibition space is as like as a node, a connecting point. and working through that. And then it's a platform. So I'm not operating within the framework of the gallery or the white cube as this like closed off pristine box, but rather I'm trying to signify something that's more lateral, horizontal, sort of the open space of the platform as surface, stage, and technical platform. And perhaps seeing this space as a node and a network of sort of momentary connections that people can have. This is what the truck looks like. And there are a lot of other things that are also really unique about this space. It's really intimate. Only 3 to 5 people can fit in the truck at a time. So I have very personal interactions with the audience, which is wonderful. I also generally, for the pop-ups, I'll work with galleries around LA and then other organizations, which means I'm able to kind of develop close relationships with a lot of different exhibition partners and connect to many different communities and audiences. And I'm really interested to see how that develops over time and where that goes. And some people also will only view the project through Instagram, social media, so it has this whole other side of representing the exhibitions and artworks. And I've been thinking a lot about what Hito Sterol talks about as the artwork as currency, or Mackenzie Wark's concept of the art as a derivative. So again, sort of thinking about like how exhibition practices are, sort of negotiated and realized through these different sort of social media platforms. And then also, the space in a lot of ways makes sense for the city of Los Angeles, which is defined by its car culture, by its geography, by its sprawl. And in the future, I'm developing more exhibitions that are site-specific. So for instance, in the fall, I'm doing a show about the infrastructures for oil production in LA, and I'm hoping to actually open the truck up around some of those active sites in Los Angeles. So given this platform, given the design of the space, I sort of want to leave with this question of what are its politics, and I'm still figuring that out. And the situation changes for every show. I've only had 2 exhibitions. I just opened in September. The first show was called Fuck the Patriarchy. It was about fitting for this conference, right? We had some bumper stickers too. They were pretty cool. Those were for sale. Jamila has one on her laptop. So the Fuck the Patriarchy was about hope and refusal in the Trump era and what that might look like. A lot of the works, especially in the show, were really centered around language, about sort of slogans, about the circulation of statements. So I'm kind of thinking about that. There's the bumper sticker. The show that I have up right now is called Liquid Love, and the show considers expression of love, desire, and affection when these basic human needs are mediated or manipulated for profit by technological platforms. And one thing I've sort of noticed about the show too is there's some Instagram favorites. So this is the show, and I have so a lot of people love to take photos of themselves with, this is a piece by Sophia Lafraga and Renan Johnson. Something I think about too is my own presence in the space. So as I mentioned, I'm always sort of interfacing directly with the people who come into the gallery. And so it's very one-on-one. And I worked in institutions for a long time, so it's been actually like really wonderful to have those direct connections with people. And then also for this show right now, there's a web, as I mentioned with all the shows that I'm using the website as a gallery space too. So if you go to Gas.Gallery right now, there's a piece by Olivia Mole that is a documentation of a performance that she did at the opening, and then also this Instagram that she created as part of that. So so basically, I just wanted to sort of introduce this project, think about how it, how this space is operating as a platform, and sort of consider the design of the space and figure out its politics in this conversation. So I'm gonna hand it over, and thank you so much for your time. Oh wait, there's my dog. Oh wait, that was really important. Anyway. I had to make sure Rosie was in there.
So I'm going to go ahead and start with a video, and then I'll talk about the work. Chicanos and Chicanas and people of color experience many things in life and make history, yet most of the time get unnoticed or misrepresented. Veteranas and Rucas is not just an Instagram account, it's a digital archive that documents the Chicano or Latino youth culture in Southern California. Veteranas en Rucas started out of an urgency to reconnect with family and my community that I had left behind. If I Google searched my experiences as a teenager, what would I look for? Unfortunately, I wasn't finding anything online. I wanted to read and look at images of brown bodies at backyard parties, cruising the boulevard. I began to understand the body as archives, bodies that documented memories and trauma. I wasn't looking for fashion images, male-dominated images. I was looking for something more intimate, but that was my struggle, being away from my community, yet wanting to feel really close. The Instagram serves as a way to reframe our history. When I started posting my own photos and these photos from Street Beat magazine, people started submitting their own. So what I'm trying to do here is create a platform where people share their stories the way they want to share them. Whatever photo they find empowering, people that they miss, whether it's a relative or a loved one. Slide it in the DM. Okay, let me open one that was just sent 2 minutes ago. Cuba homegirl, I just wanted to show you a couple of flicas of my tia's homegirls from Pacoima Flats, the tiny locas. Left is Chata, and on the right is La Chica, 1979. In some sense, I feel like an archivist. I love taking care of the material that people submit or bring to my studio. It's a labor of love. And these things are precious to me. I need to have this material that is proof that this history existed.
Me too.
That video, my friend and I worked on it together, so I want to also thank her. She's not here, but if she ever watches this. So when I started this project, I wasn't really thinking about, pretty much doing digital art or digital archiving. I had left LA in 2000. I was 19 years old, and I moved to New York. And pretty much I disconnected myself from my family in LA, friends and family, and my entire community. And so maybe like around 2000, maybe like 2013 or 14, I started reaching out to my family and friends in LA. I'm still living in New York at the time. And I started using the internet as a way to reconnect, to keep up with what was going on in LA, looking for photos of friends, and unfortunately I wasn't finding anything. So what happened was I talked to a friend about, I remember struggling to tell him what my upbringings were, my teenage years in LA, and I realized that it was kind of difficult for me to describe my own experience in LA. So what I did was that also, I didn't bring a lot of material to New York. I only had maybe wallet-sized photos, maybe 5 photos, and some magazines, which you just saw in the video. And I started the Instagram, and I started posting my own photos and photos that I found in the magazine that I could I guess more I could relate to. And in the bio, I wrote, if anyone has any photos I would say pre-iPhones or not so much internet, or it's more I guess selfies. And so then it's just what happened was that as soon as I put that out there, maybe in a week, I had 2,000 followers, and then it kept growing, and people started submitting photos. And the DMs that were coming to me, a lot of the direct messages and emails that were coming to me were people who were who had these photos in their storage or in their garage or under their bed, something that I didn't really have outside, in their living rooms or they've also been collecting dust in storages. So people started taking these out and submitting these photos. And this is one example. and also just something that I mentioned in the video, it's the Instagram is focused on women, because everything that I was looking for, everything that I was finding online were mostly male dominated images. And also, the other thing that I find interesting about the feed is that the image does demote, like it activates the conversation, and then the common thread is a place where people reminisce together, whether they're strangers or they know each other. People have connected through these images. So this photo is from 1992, was taken in Boyle Heights. And when I posted this photo, a lot of people didn't believe that it was from 1992. Even though I mentioned it twice. And what's also like, people started commenting on the fashion, saying like, people dress like that now, what are you talking about? And then someone who's like 42 would be like, I went to school with them. This is 1992. So, and then people started, commenting on like the shoes, like, oh, like those shoes don't exist anymore. So it's definitely 1992. In 2016, I started Map Points. And Map Points is a page that is focused on the party scene and the rave culture in Southern California, just Latino and brown. And the reason why I did this is because Veteranas and Rucas, it's a little bit more loose. It talks about gang culture, lowriders, the party scene, or just, like the young brown woman who grew up in the midst of gangs and the party scene, but didn't really like associate with one more than the other. Map Points, it's strictly the rave and the party scene. And what's interesting about this page is that a lot of people from outside of the US, mostly like Berlin or Italy, they'll like comment, they'll send me a message and say to me, just like the most random stuff like, oh, I didn't know that you guys listen to house and techno. So, and of course I have to tell them like, well, house music comes from Chicago, black producers, black DJs, so, they need to get the credit. This is a photo that belongs to my sister. It's also in the Instagram. This is also very DIY, as you can see. This is how we organize our parties. Just throw 2 shopping carts, and you have a DJ stand. This is a photo that was taken in one of the backyard parties. Again, it looks like it was taken yesterday. Physical and virtual. So now coming into physical spaces. The page has grown so much that I've met friends, I made friends through Instagram, I reconnected with people, and now I'm thinking about bringing these conversations into physical spaces. So this photo here is from a picnic that I organized in the Midwest. And what happened was Philbrook Museum in Tulsa, Oklahoma, sent me an email and asked me to organize an event. They didn't care what it was. They just wanted me to do something there. And for me, this is something that I do on a regular basis. I organize lowrider cruise nights, picnics. I organize these events with people who I'm in touch with through Instagram, and I agreed to do this in Oklahoma. But when I agreed, I was a little scared because I was like, I don't know the Midwest at all, and I don't even know the lowrider scene exists there. So anyway, what happened? It was pretty much a lot of like. I used the platform to connect with people and to put it out there, hey, I'm going to throw this event. I'm looking for car clubs. And the whole museum pretty much was occupied with brown folks. And we used their lawn. The museum was free. And I would say maybe over 1,000 people showed up. So for me, it was really, I don't know, I mean, it was really, really amazing because it's something that would seem very impossible, you know, because then that also made me realize, like, we're everywhere. So, I mean, there were hundreds of cars there, and it was really beautiful. This is a photo that belongs to a photographer, Eddie Rubalcaba, and he and I have been collaborating a lot. These photographs, he photographed for the magazine, Street magazine, and he also documented the LA riots and all that. And what happened was that in 1994, he became a drug addict and got kicked out of the house. And his mom threw out everything out on the street, and you can see some water damage here on the negative. So, you know, he went back to his home, and he saw all his stuff on the street. He picked up a few things. This is in 1994. And then, you know, I met him about a year ago, and through Instagram, and he was showing me all these photos that were actually the ones, let me just go back. This is one of his photos. So they're very clean, pristine. And this is all what he was showing me. So then I told him, can you scan whatever got damaged? And this is what he scanned. And I told him, well, we should collaborate. These need to come back to life. You know, you need to show these because this is not just telling your story, but it's also telling my story. It's telling a lot of our stories. And this photo was taken in 1992 around the LA riots. People were putting signs on the stores, like the owners were putting like Mexican owner, black owned, so their stores wouldn't get damaged. There's another photo of his, another water damaged image. And we decided to put it in a show at Commonwealth. So this is up now. So it's almost like getting the second life or second chance. This is a show that's there now. I started bringing these archives into physical spaces, and I'm really interested in using the exhibition space as a place where people can have these conversations, where people can donate material. This is supposed to be like an altar slash, or I guess inspire like a teenage teenage bedroom. And what's happening in this room is people are donating material. People leave things here. This is a box of a pedestal with a woman who I met through Instagram. This is her archive. This is a backpack made out of a Tide box. And this is original stuff, you know, some tapes, some glow sticks that no longer function, the Tide box, flyers. The beaded necklace with the whistle, and a photo of a friend who passed away in 1995, and his mom actually brought that photo and left it there. This is another thing. This was his sweatshirt. His mom brought the sweater, wrote a letter, and brought some photos to honor his life and death. I think that's, oh no, here we go. So people leave notes and flowers and, I mean, just pretty much anything that represents the party scene. I think that's it. Thank you.
That was so beautiful. This is going to take a dark turn, just so everybody knows. There's a downer on the panel. The web's not all. Anyway, so thanks so much for having me, even though this is going to be sort of a downer, at this amazing event. It's an honor to be among so many inspirational activist artists. So I make, where to start? I'm a research-based artist making video games, written works, videos, performances, and interventions, often within video game and multi-user online contexts. I also teach at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, so I'm here from Pittsburgh. In these 5 minutes that Aria has given me, I'm going to talk about my experience making work in specific online communities. For 4 years, I created performative interventions inside the multiplayer online role-playing video game World of Warcraft. Anybody ever play it? Woo! Yeah! Feminists who play WoW. Instead of killing enemies and getting the badass equipment I had for 6 years prior to its founding, as the Council on Gender Sensitivity and Behavioral Awareness in World of Warcraft, I started traveling to highly populated virtual towns in the game to discuss the ways in which women were treated in the game space with other players. WoW has had a player base that's notorious for being quite hostile toward women, members of the queer community, and people of color. The project shifted in intention over time from initially wanting to change the communal language in the space to ultimately realizing how colonial my impulse was and shifting to rather trying to create a presence and public visibility for the issues of exclusivity that marginalized players face in the space by meeting and talking about it regularly or just taking up space. Through the 4 years of the project, the council ended up having a generally appreciated and active presence on the primary server I played on, and an intentional, inclusive community guild was created as a result of regularly hosting these conversations, as the community came up with long-term ways for the project to live on without my facilitation. Hopefully you can sort of see what's going on there. Go forward. We can actually just move this a little bit ahead. Okay. In the midst of that long-term project, I started another, which was also focused on facilitating dialogue with niche internet communities that are not inclusive to women. Ooh, out of order. Starting in 2014, I became interested in a figure named Rushvi, after many men I talked to in World of Warcraft told me that they were members of the manosphere. In case you're not familiar, Rushvi is one of the leaders of the anti-feminist online community called the Manosphere, and he's been called the most infamous misogynist on the internet. He has earned this term. He spends his time traveling around the world teaching men how to perform in particular ways in order to have sex with as many women as possible across geographic, language, and cultural barriers as quickly as possible. As I was reading his books and his blogs and his active community forum, one thing really stuck out to me. In Rush's accounts of his sexual exploits, the perspectives of the women he's explicitly talking about in his books and blog posts are never represented. So I decided that I wanted to create a web and book project through which I had hoped to give the supposedly thousands of women that Rushvi has had sexual exchanges with That was unexpected. I'll start over again. Yeah, so okay. So I decided that I wanted to create a web and book project through which I'd hope to give the supposedly thousands of women that Rushvi has slept with, using the extreme and aggressive strategies outlined in his books and blogs, an opportunity to anonymously report their experiences. Ultimately, I decided to also investigate understanding his motivations and the appeal that he and his practice held for his growing community of followers, many of whom make up what is now being politically called the alt-right. I ended up doing a Skype interview with him. This is a complicated project to explain in like 2 minutes, but the results of this accidental 2-hour-long Skype interview included both my first foray into writing for mainstream journalistic publications, including, on the one end, a sustained social media-based harassment campaign against me by the Manosphere, and on the other end, a regular stream of emails from women who shared their experiences with pickup artists with me, as well as men who admitted that they'd never had a conversation with a self-identified feminist before, and that my interview with Rush changed their limited understanding of what feminists were. So the last project that I'll talk about, this sort of experience led into this. The Game is a project that was very informed by my experience researching Rushvi and his Manosphere community. Toward the end of the Bang project, something I felt was getting in the way of the work was my performance role. The project became very much about my experience operating in the field. Despite my experience, I haven't abandoned this field. I'm just putting myself out of the spotlight and making my next project less about my mediation of and intervention in these spaces, and more about creating an embodied way for people to digest experiences from and ideologies within these manosphere seduction communities. The Game is a research-based dating simulator video game, and you're seeing selected parts of a playthrough video here. In the game, I present the different seduction techniques of famous pickup artists and allow those pickup artists to speak for themselves through their work and set players up to interact with them in a common location for pickup art, a bar. Players, regardless of personal gender identity, are put into the position of experiencing a common scenario that femme-presenting people experience, having their personal space invaded when it's unwelcome by men who feel entitled to it. All of the dialogue in this game is constructed from actual word-for-word advice written by these pickup artists, and also situations from their own hidden camera footage that they sell to their devoted followers they cultivate online. It's actually quite a lucrative industry. You may not believe that, but it's true. As a player and as the target of pickup artists' attention, you can make a broad range of decisions in the game, from opting to hook up with different pickup artists in multiple locations, to attempting to get away from them immediately. In constructing this game, I didn't want to make the point necessarily escape, and I hope that players, if they aren't triggered by it, do experiment with seeing what a successful conquest looks like from the perspective of each of the pickup artists. The game never slut-shames the player by any means, and also allows you to turn the tables and pursue the pickup artist yourself, at your own risk, of course. Over the 3 years I've been working on this project, I've become interested in exploring the complexity of these practices and not flattening them in the way that mainstream media does, and instead mapping them out and making their complexities more accessible. By making these pickup art practices an embodied experience and putting players into the position of making decisions and walking through interactions with them, I think there are insights to be gained that wouldn't be gained through other media, like by reading about this field, for example. Little plug. If you will be in New York before March 25th, the game is currently on display at a solo show I have at the Museum of the Moving Image, and it's also going to be online by the end of March. I also want to mention that it has a musical score composed by the band Shoo Shoo, so it's also quite intense. You didn't get to hear that here, but I just wanted to mention that. Thanks for listening.
So yeah, I have some questions that I sent you all beforehand, but just to sort of ground our conversation, but also happy to discuss. I think, well, actually, first I wanted to say, Angela, if you wanted to talk more about the alt-right and weird pickup artist thing, because it felt like there was a lot more that you wanted to say. If you wanted to, like, I don't know if there's anything important for that you...
I mean, I think what you're going to ask later, I have a lot of things to say in response, so I don't have to do that specifically now.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, so the first question I had was really broad. So since we're here to talk about the web as political space, how does the structure of the web's movement from the internet to a series of platforms impact the political and artistic possibilities of working and interacting online? And so I think you kind of all touched on that in your presentations, but was there anything to add about how you see that happen in your practice?
I can start. Can I hold this? Is that okay? I feel better about this. So I think one of the big shifts from the internet, the Web 1.0 internet, to the contemporary platform system that we have now is a shift from anonymity, so having a series of handles or avatars or whatever that you are sort of masking yourself behind, to today's sort of real name policies, and also the cross-platform linkability. So, you know, you have a Google account, which is also attached to your YouTube account, which is also attached to a million other accounts that sort of identify you and your behavior across different networks. And so from an artistic perspective, historically, or not that historically, because it's not that long ago, cyber feminists had this sort of like utopian idea about the possibilities of what performing online would be like without being not having to know who you were behind the screen. Unfortunately, as we all know, the first thing everybody wants to know when they meet you anonymously online is ASL, yeah, age, sex, location. Like books like Race in Cyberspace by Lisa Nakamura, and texts like A Rape in Cyberspace really go into great detail about the way that sort of broke down. Today, like, real name policies have made artists and activists who make challenging work online very, very vulnerable. And I think my experiences were sort of naively going into the manosphere head first, thinking that some of the tactics that I applied to working in World of Warcraft, where I was already very visible as a community member for 10 years, I kind of forgot about or didn't even think about what it would mean to work in that sort of space and have everybody know who I was. And also it made me aware of how visible I was online and how all of my activity, wherever I was going, wherever I was presenting something, was very, very easy to track. And that community let me know that they knew where I was all the time. So making things sort of private and changing my relationship to who I am online really changed as a result of realizing how vulnerable I was and how I wasn't even using anything like 1Password and stuff like that, how easy it was to sort of trace my behavior because of the sort of linkability of the platforms that we have now. So yeah, I think that's a definite challenge with artists working online right now, particularly within artist activism.
Yeah, so when I started the project, I was anonymous for about a year. And the reason was because I knew that the work that I was trying to do was very sensitive because of the histories, because of the way we have been criminalized in the past and still. And so I wanted to take this like slow process to open up the conversation and show my identity and all that stuff. And then when people started contacting me for interviews or just wanting to meet, I realized that the work and the digital archives needed a voice. So it couldn't just be this like robot or anonymous person behind. And for me, it was also because the material, the stories and the images that I was working with are important, So I wanted people to know that it was like a real person who also grew up with this history. I wanted to use that as a way where people can connect and also feel, I guess, safe, to have these conversations.
Okay, I have another question then, sort of, related to both of your practices, I think in particular, but anyone can feel free to answer. I think there's a certain, I think like you've expressed sort of different but also overlapping understandings of the possibilities for community online, but also like the hostilities that, and I know that you, Lupe, mentioned before, not in your presentation, but maybe you can talk about the sort of hostilities that also come into play in viewing the Instagram project. I don't know.
I'll just keep the mic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also really interesting to see how people feel comfortable to talk about something very personal, but it's also very vulnerable. It's a vulnerable place. I've met people who, I mean, there's an Instagram out there that started after they, the woman and I met, and we talked about our histories and our experiences are very similar. So then she was inspired to start her own page, and I remember when she contacted me, we were like texting each other and talking about growing up in LA, and she sent me a photo of her with a scar on her like torso, and she said, I would never show this online because it's like so traumatic for me. And maybe about a year after that, after she started her Instagram, her page has like 14,000 followers now, and she posts photos of herself and like the parties that she went to. They're all personal archives.
And she posted a photo, that specific photo, and she talked about what happened to her. You know, she was like involved in a drive-by shooting and she was paralyzed for 6 months and all that. There's that part, but then, you know, something I shared with you earlier was, you know, it also depends on whose platform we like bring this up, you know, or these conversations, whose platform we're using. I took over LACMA's page last year for 3 months, and there's a photo that I posted there, and I was going to like all the PST shows, talking about art and everything, and then I'll post throwback photos, and I posted this photo of four young women standing in Boyle Heights, all brown women, and I get a comment that says, and now I will unfollow LACMA for posting photos like this. And someone else said, like, photos like what? Like, do you know them? And she's like, well, women like them made my life miserable. So, and then I compare that photo with my platform, you know, and on my platform, they were all like excited to see a throwback photo. They started like reminiscing. People recognize some of the people. So like that's also really interesting, you know, to see how on the platform, on LACMA's platform, you get a lot of racism and criminalization, all that stuff, and then, so yeah, that's it could be hostile.
I think it's interesting that make it thick or make it viscous thing as well in terms of cyber feminism, which I feel like in the early, like, yeah, VNS Matrix, like Cyber Feminist Manifesto, like the sort of invocation of like goo and like kind of having this like that stickiness be some sort of feminist approach towards the internet or something. I don't know if does anyone have, I guess, more direct ideas on, yeah, like feminist or like queer approaches to, I think that in terms of, it's also, I think, like that VNS position also comes from like a very like queer theoretical space as well. But I don't know, do you?
I actually would, like, in this week I was listening to this podcast from eFlux that was an interview with Zach Blass talking about his show Artist Space right now and his general work around sort of the contra internet. And I think what he's trying to formalize or understand is you know, a queer feminist rethinking of like the infrastructures of the internet. So like listening to you guys, we're talking about like what we see on we were not talking about how these things actually work and how they are actually built. And I think that what Zach's, you know, trying to approach in his work is like what are the open spaces within the things that are built, and how, like, if we do have this like paradigm of the distributed network being the thing that filters into so many of these platforms, and then those things and the actual inner workings of those platforms are totally obscure to us, then like what openings or allowances are there? And I think that's something that Zach's trying to think through.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think like yeah, like sort of like I guess that or sort of circles back into what we wanted to talk about today, and sort of like how do you feel like do you see ways in which people are maybe like beyond Zach Blass's sort of more maybe theoretical like approach towards that, but like practical ways for people to like exploit these infrastructures or something like that?
I mean, I think there's a pretty, I guess, a movement that gives me some hope that's happening within people pushing back to online harassment, certain responses to Gamergate, if you weren't familiar or aren't familiar, was a movement targeted toward women, trans, developers of color making games that are critical of mainstream games, or making written works that were critical of some of the usually representation issues within games culture. And what came out of that was sort of a sustained harassment campaign that has really affected a very vibrant community of makers. And something that came out of that was that platforms like Twitter were forced to really look at what the codes of conduct are within their platforms. I think right now there's an unfortunately very like binary discourse around like freedom of speech like and censorship versus like platforms actually deciding what is acceptable behavior as a community within those platforms, and a lot of work is being sort of censored by content moderation, And so yeah, there's been a lot of pushback around forcing these platforms and their developers to be more accountable and more transparent about their policies, and the hiring of a lot of people who have been sort of impacted by movements like Gamergate at different game development studios and also places like Twitter and Facebook. So I'm hopeful that that isn't just doing sort of lip service, and that will actually lead to structural change within those platforms. But it's because of a lot of activism about people sort of testifying to their experiences and pushing back, and that has, led to at least some structural change.
Okay, so we have time for questions from the audience.
Hi, Guadalupe. I really like your work. Thank you for existing in the world. I grew up on the El Paso Juarez border, and I was a raver girl in the 90s. And I'm wondering if you are thinking about taking your project into other cities to find out sort of like the Chicano rave culture and other places.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to keep the focus on Southern California because it just becomes too big. But I do encourage others to start an archive. I'm willing to, mentor. I guide them through. There's actually one that just started, so I have to tell you. I can't remember. I think it's like Texas. I can't remember the name, but maybe we'll connect after. One just started, and if you go to Map Points, you'll see it there because I posted something about that. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people do ask me if I'm going to start, a digital archive, outside of Southern California, and the only thing that I could do now is encourage people, but also if let's say I was just in New York a few days ago, and I met with people there, and did studio visits, and also I brought some archives with me, so anyone that wanted to look at the material, meet me somewhere, I would meet them in person. I mean, I love connecting with people outside of California, so yeah.
One of the things I loved about all these projects, and that I think is so great about thinking about technology as this space, but also very practically driving around the city, is that all of these have a way in which the accessibility of these tools is sort of emphasized. The fact that we can make websites, that we all have Google search histories, that we have images that we want to get online, and I'm wanting to kind of push on that, kind of what have you seen the efficacy of reminding people that they already use these tools in creative ways, and that can be part of something either you bring into the project or that you remind through the project, and sort of how that has been something you've made part of your practices, getting people to think about this content creation or content sharing or content access as a new form of creativity that we're all sort of participating in.
I mean, I often, people ask me oh, you're started an arts organization, how hard is that? And it's actually really not that hard, and I encourage people to do it. And actually, to plug, Common Field just published a PDF written by Mark Allen that is how to start an arts organization. So if you're curious, you should check out Common Field and look that up. But yeah, no, I mean, I obviously probably a lot of you guys too came up through sort of different subcultures and stuff, and it's all about information sharing and encouraging people to take part and do their own thing and create their own space, and I kind of see that ethos in all of your practices. So yeah, I don't know.
Because so many of my students are, we're all using our devices all the time, and I encourage them to think about that as not. At this point, I hope we all realize that the digital is real, it's the real world. And so as they're making, I know, isn't it crazy? Isn't it crazy that that's real life in the screen thing? Yeah. And so as they're thinking about making in the world, this is another world that they're inhabiting, and that they can have a critical relationship to those spaces, and that those spaces aren't neutral, and thinking about how to sort of critically intervene in those spaces, I think is really important, and not just accepting by default the sort of rules of those spaces and how they function and how they're understood by those networks, and how their performance on those networks is being monetized in certain ways. So those are some of the things that I think about, I guess.
Okay, well,
Thanks
I
for
think that's all we have time for, but thank you so much, everyone.